James Thomas.
BBC Wiltshire.
For some of us, summer holidays are pretty much the only time we get to sit down and read a book properly because we're all busy for the rest of the year. So it's nice when you get to chill out and open up a book and have a little read. Well, if you've ever tried to panic buy a book at the airport, you'll know what an overwhelming array of books there are on the shelves, billed as holiday reads. But don't worry, because the afternoon show is here to help. We've asked Wiltshire book blogger Jackie Law to give us some recommendations so you can feel confident about the books that you put into your suitcase. And she's with me in the studio now. Hello, afternoon.
Hello, thank you for inviting me in.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and joining us. From Derry Hill, I gather. And so where did you start this book blog then? Why did you decide to do that?
I started my blog about 5 years ago, and I was writing an eclectic mix of posts, and I started to post the book reviews on it and realised that there is such a thing as a book blogger, and publishers started getting in touch and sending me books, which was wonderful. So I started to read them and post the reviews.
So actually get to the point where people are sending you books because they want you to review them? That's
right, yes. I mean, I use my local library, and I buy books, of course, and other people buy me books because I just adore books. I have far too many at home, which my husband complains about quite a lot.
I'm imagining you as in like one of those old-fashioned libraries where you have to get the ladder that sort of like rolls along on runners along there, picking out all the books.
I would love to have a ladder in my library, but it's not quite that big.
So what kind of literature are you into mostly? What kind of stuff do you tend to read?
Most of the stuff is contemporary fiction. I tend to like the independent presses because their work tends to be a bit more risk-taking. They're not just following a trend, which the bigger publishers, their marketing departments like them to follow the trends that they know will sell, whereas I like to look for whatever is new. So the small publishers like Gallybeggar and Influx Press and Salt Publishing are coming out with some wonderful books. So I seek those out.
I think that's a really amazing thing to be able to do, to seek out those little hidden treasures as well. Do you ever have to leave negative reviews as well? Do you ever have those moments where you're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to write something not too good about this?
Unfortunately, yes, but my reviews wouldn't be any use if I didn't write an honest opinion. So yes, some of my reviews can be quite cutting, but mostly I know the books I'm going to enjoy, and obviously I don't want to spend time reading books I'm not enjoying. So most of my reviews are fairly positive, but there are the occasional negative one in there.
And are people allowed to comment as well? Are you sort of to have discussions with anybody about particular books?
I have my blog open, but the comments are all moderated, so I will only put certain comments up there. And I do try to reply, but I don't always have time. I put quite a lot of reviews up, and it takes time to do everything. So I try to get back to people who are kind enough to comment, but I don't always write that much. I wouldn't say it was a conversation.
Now, I am such a slow reader. I love reading, but it takes me forever to get through a book. So if you're posting a review of things very regularly, how on earth do you get through them quick enough to be able to post a review? You must be a very speedy reader.
I spend a lot of time reading. I probably shouldn't spend quite so much of my life reading books, but I love reading, so it is my passion.
And what about the ongoing battle between, well, I suppose in some ways it's a battle, in some ways it's not, between e-readers and reading a normal book? Now, I swore that I would never get an e-reader, and I love reading a physical book. There's something really nice about being able to open it up and thumb through the pages and to have that physical thing with the picture on the front of it as well. But I do a lot of travelling around as well, and sometimes I get the train and things like that, so having an e-reader is really easy. So I've actually just got an e-reader, but when I'm at home, I still like to read normal books. Where do you stand on that?
I do not read e-books. That's my personal choice. I think they're an excellent invention, particularly for people who cannot perhaps see the print in a hard copy easily. They can make the print on an e-reader bigger. Or for people who travel, they can load lots and lots of books on. When I travel, I carry lots of hard copy. My suitcase is probably a quarter full of books. But that is my choice. When I worked a couple of decades ago, I was a computer scientist, and I think working on computers all the time, I just like to relax with a book, so I do not read e-books.
So you take the hit on not being able to put, a certain dress in or something, because instead you put the books in there instead. Yeah?
Yes.
Well, we're going to have a chat in a few moments' time about the book that you've chosen to have a look at this week. We have a bit of music first. Here's Dr. Hook, and then when we come back, we'll talk to Jackie about the book that we're looking at this week. What's it called? What are we going to be talking about?
It is called Their Brilliant Careers by Ryan O'Neill.
Lovely stuff. We'll talk about that next.
Never ready.
Dr. Hook, When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman on BBC Wiltshire. Jackie Law's with me in the studio from Derry Hill. She's a book blogger and she's giving us some recommendations of what we can read this summer. So then we're looking over your first review this week. What's the book called again? Who's the author?
It's called Their Brilliant Careers. It's written by Ryan O'Neill.
Give us a little bit of a précis about what it's about then, because it's fictional autobiographies, that's right, isn't it? Yes,
it's 16 short biographies of extraordinary Australian writers you will never have heard of. And this is because they don't exist. It's a work of fiction, obviously, but a lot of the writers have been based on people who did exist. And many of the events that you read in the book that seem, that could never happen are based on true events. The writers all know each other. It's a very close community of writers, but there's a lot of competition. So although they get to know each other and they seem to be great friends, they milk those friendships in an attempt to improve their own careers.
So there are a few catty comments about the other authors and that sort of thing.
It's very funny, it does. It makes fun of the writers, but it's not done in a cruel way.
So basically, it's fictional. It's 17, I think, isn't it?
16.
Oh, 16 fictional autobiographies of these different writers in Australia. And what was it about it particularly that you enjoyed? Was it the humour aspect of it?
Yes, I obviously have an interest in the literary world, and I've met a lot of authors because I do interviews with them on my blog, and I also meet publishers. And it seemed very authentic. These writers could have existed. And you see comments on Twitter where certain writers obviously don't like other writers, and they don't want to say that. They want to be kind and supportive, but sometimes these little criticisms creep in.
So there's almost sort of like caricatures of Australian writers. That's kind of a send-up of the literary atmosphere in Australia, I guess.
Absolutely. Now, it is from the past. It's biographies of writers who, many of them have passed on, but they are based on true writers. I believe those with more knowledge of the Australian literary scene than I have can see where these writers have been taken from, or where two writers have been joined together to make one of the writers featured in the biography.
So if we're to read this over the summer, some of the Aussie humour, can it get lost maybe on a British audience, do you think?
No, they are all Australian writers, but, as a British writer, I read it and I found it very funny, and I saw a lot of similarities between the writers who I read about, particularly in the mainstream media when they interview writers and when some of them come out with controversial statements. And, of course, Twitter goes mad because they've said something they disagree with, and suddenly their book sales go up. And it's that sort of the fun side, which, it's a little bit catty, but it's not done in a cruel way. It's done in a very funny way.
Out of 5 stars then, what would you give it?
Oh, I'd give it 5 stars.
5 out of 5, wow, yes. Straight off the bat, lovely. And we can read a full review of that on your blog, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
What's the address for the blog?
It's neverimitate.wordpress.co.uk.
Neverimitate.wordpress.org.uk. Lovely stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Jackie. Really appreciate it. What are you going to be reading for the next week then, do you think?
Well, I've just finished John Boyne's new book, A Ladder to the Sky, and I have Patrick Gale's new one, which comes out at the end of August. So that's probably next on my list.
Fabulous stuff. Thank you so much. And we can go and read those reviews on the blog. So thank you, and have a good trip back to Derry Hill.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.